Well, welcome everyone to a meeting of the OPDC Governance Subcommittee. And we have present committee members Jennifer Parrish Taylor, Rob Harris, Addie Smith. I'm Susan Manderberg, the chair. And also on the panel is Scott Martin, who is an agency employee. Scott, I'm sorry, I forgot your actual title. It's not on the tip of my tongue. Do you want to say what it is?
This is Scott Martin. Yeah, I'm the Chief Audit Executive.
Thank you. I'm going to make some changes in the agenda. We're going to discuss the Audit Committee charter first. And I think we need at least 15 minutes to do that rather than the 5 minutes that was originally on the agenda. Then we'll discuss the email situation, and then we'll discuss bylaws, and finally talk about fixed dates for committee meetings, and then new business. So starting with the Audit Committee charter, Rob, you want to start with a progress report on where we are with this?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Susan. There's 3 documents attached to the agenda. As the first would be starting on page 2. Well, actually, I'm going to start with the third one that's attached here, which I think is starting on page Audit Committee Charter. Apologize while I scroll through this. Starts on page 13. That was a draft by the Audit Committee that was before this governance subcommittee at the last or the one before that meeting. I don't think that we had a quorum last time. And we went through that draft, and some of the changes that were suggested were made in red. I believe this is historically accurate. That, with those red lines, went back to the Audit Committee. We had a meeting, and I don't know the date, but it was September, I believe. And based on the request of this committee, the Audit Committee came up with the draft starting on page 2. So the one on page 2 incorporated one of the original audits committee's charters, and took the feedback from this governance committee. Between those times, I think General Counsel and Scott Martin and John Hutzler, the chair of the Audit Committee, talked about how to incorporate those changes. I believe that we did. That was presented to the Audit Committee, and so Scott came up with the incorporated changes. And then the Audit Committee had a couple of items as well, and those are in red on the document that starts on page 2. And you can see the 2 items that the Audit Committee discussed that I don't know that were before this subcommittee. Would be on page 5, and that's about removal of members who don't show up, and that will be done. If they just don't show up, the committee chair can remove them. Otherwise, they can be removed with or without cause by a majority vote of the Audit Committee. And then the last item, we talked about confidentiality, and the issue came up about, well, you just can't say everything's confidential. There's certain state statutes about freedom of information and public records that we have to be complied with. So we put that general statement in there, and that's what we came up with to deal with that particular issue that we had. That document went to Chair Susan Manderberg, and Susan came up with a renumbered, and took that and largely just renumbered it and reorganized it in a couple of sections, which I went through yesterday. And so she added, I'll let you talk about that, Susan. My understanding is she added the blue text to make it her reorganization conform, like the headings, titles, and areas. And that's in blue. And I didn't see any material changes to the intent, scope, or purpose of the audit charter as I went through it. And I think she kept some of our red underlined. She did. She kept the red items that we had talked about from the Audit Committee that we had added from the Audit Committee, so this committee could be clear as to what the Audit Committee addressed that was not necessarily included in that first meeting that we had. So I think what we're looking at here, and I talked to Scott on this, I don't know, it was maybe a week or two ago, as we were batting these back and forth. And my understanding, I'm new to the audit committee, obviously, I'm not an auditor. So if there's specific questions about the substance of this, I asked Scott to be a panelist so he could address those questions, or perhaps I could as well, but hopefully we'd be able to answer any questions this committee had. But I know that Scott, John, and I think it was Eric from the agency have been going through this and trying to fine tune this to make sure the intent of this governance committee and the audit committee was accurately reflected, and the law and the OARs were accurately reflected in this charter. So where we're at now is we ping pong this back and forth a couple of times, and I think I'd be looking to finally fine tune this and approve this today, hopefully. And it would be based on Susan's latest draft document that's reorganized a little bit and renumbered. And that's the document starting on page 7. So that's where we're at now. And I think I'm hoping this is ready for approval, possibly with some fine tuning by this governance committee. But I think we're there. And that's the summary of the process and where we're at and what we should be doing today. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. So I took nothing out of what you all sent me, and I was just having trouble following it because it seemed like some things were out of order that would have made more sense with things that they related to. So, and for me, it was just easier to put things in an outline form, and I think makes it easier to refer to different provisions. So I took nothing out. Some of the change language was just to make it grammatical, given the reorganization. But I do have some questions. And if Addie or Jennifer, do you have any questions or comments? I'm happy to let you go first. Otherwise, I'll just barge in.
Please go.
I should barge. Okay. So I'm going to refer to the numbers in the reorganization that I did. As I said, I find that easier to refer to. So in section B, duties, subsection 5, and subsection A, biannually review and assess the adequacy of the audit committee charter. I actually looked up the word biannually because I didn't know whether you meant twice a year or every 2 years. And when I looked it up in the dictionary helpfully said biannually sometimes means twice a year and sometimes means once every 2 years. So I thought it would be a good idea to sort of put in there be clearer about which one you meant. Scott, do you have an idea of which one you meant there?
I agree. I did the same lookup myself, Chair Mandelberg, and the intent here is every 2 years.
Every 2 years. So if I change that to every 2 years, that would be a friendly amendment.
Yes, it would.
Fantastic.
I'll also add that John Hutzler has looked at this last evening and did not have any issues with it when he reviewed your blue line version.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Thank you very much for taking the time to do that. In C2, the audit committee shall include the following members. The last one, sub E, says the chief audit executive who serves as a non-voting member of the committee. Does that mean that all the other ones are voting members, including the agency's executive director and the agency's budget and finance manager or designee? So everybody's a voting member except for you?
Chair Mandelberg, that is correct.
Okay, so if I put something in to make it clear that these are all voting members, instead of just leaving that by implication, would that be okay?
That
Yeah.
would be okay by me. Thank you.
Great. in C2D, it says between 4 and 6 additional external members. That word additional was in there when this was organized differently. If I took it out, it wouldn't change the meaning. It was just because the committee chairperson, the commission member, the executive director, and the budget and finance manager are not external members, right?
That's correct.
Okay,
They
so
are
if I
internal.
took out additional there, that would still make sense. All right.
It would.
So in F2, so in F2, C, a quorum is necessary to hold a meeting and conduct business. If a quorum is a majority of the members,
I'm sorry,
does
Susan,
that mean a majority of the members who are,
where are we at here?
we're at F1, sorry, F1,
Okay,
and it says F1C, a quorum is necessary to hold a meeting and conduct business. So a quorum is a majority of the members have to be there. That's both internal and external, right? And so then D, audit committee action requires a quorum and the affirmative vote of at least one external member. As I read it, that means that depending on how many external members there are and who is actually present at the meeting to make up a quorum, the internal members could outvote the external members on a matter. Is that how that would work, or am I not understanding it?
I think that's right. I mean, I think that if you have the executive director, the finance, you have Scott, or not Scott, but you've got, what would the quorum be? If you had a very limited number of external members,
Yeah,
what's the math on this, Susan?
I don't know, but it seems to me that we've got the in terms of members, so
You got a commission member, agency director.
you've got a commission member, that's internal. You've got an agency executive director, that's internal. You've got the budget and finance minister, that's internal. They're all voting members. And let's say you had 4 external members, because that's the minimum number of external members you can have.
Mm-hmm.
So that means you've got 7 members. A quorum would be 4. So I guess it would always take at least one external member to pass something. So that's probably okay, right?
Yeah, I mean, you could have a situation where you have 3 external members voting one way and 1 external members and 3 agency people voting the other. So if you were talking about could the external members be outvoted, the answer is yes.
The external members could be outvoted. Is that what you all want?
I think it has to be that way. I thought about this too, but then you're basically just making the external members the voting members. Right? I mean, because if they could never be outvoted, if you want to put in there they can never be outvoted, then you might as well just make them the voting members. So
yeah, I guess I just want to make sure that this is what the audit committee wants.
I thought about this and I realized that could happen. I didn't do the exact math on that. But I thought, well, I think that otherwise you're just making the external members the only voting members. And so if the intent is to have these folks, and I think that generally speaking, the agency employees, those employed by the non-external members, I think, are commonly voting members of audit committees. I could be wrong, but that was sort of my impression, Scott. Is that true?
Can you repeat that again? I'm sorry.
I mean, when you have an audit committee, it often, the voting members include both external and internal voting members of the audit committee, don't they?
That's correct.
No. So I think it's normal to have it this way. Yeah, you know, as lawyers, we come up with all sorts of scenarios that could be really bad. But I think that this is what was intended by the audit committee. But obviously we could change that, or we could ask for a revision on that if you want to have that discussion.
Well, I just thought I'd bring it up. The other question I have here is, can the non-voting member, Scott, be counted as part of the quorum? Or is a quorum just made up of voting members? Because it doesn't say here.
Let's see, that's under F1.
F1, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you could change F1C to say a quorum is composed of a majority of voting members. I think that would make sense.
Does that work for you, Scott?
That does. I agree with that. Thank you.
Okay, I'll add that. All right, and all right, let's see. If we go down to F2E, why is it the chief audit executive who distributes the meeting agenda? Why is the audit committee chair not involved in that? I mean, does this mean that, Scott, that you put the agenda together without consulting with the chair? Or, for example, as in the commission, the agenda is put together by the executive director of the agency and the commission chair working together. And here it seems to have the agenda being put together by you alone. Is that how you all wanted it?
Chairman Borg, this is Scott. No, it's a collaborative effort.
Should that be in your charter?
I think that makes sense to add it to where it states that we're in collaboration with the audit committee chair.
Great.
That would make sense to me. Otherwise,
Okay.
it's an administrative task that I'm happy to perform.
Yeah, no, I get that. Okay, I'll do that. And
To be clear, excuse me, to be clear on that, I think that was just it needs to be distributed in 5 days. It doesn't really address preparation or finalization of the agenda. But if you want to make that, yeah, I think that's done. If you want to put that in there, amend it, that would be fine to make it clear that it's prepared, maybe approved by the chair and distributed 5 days prior, however you want to address it.
all right. And then I think they're 2.4. Oh, the public records thing, yeah. What you said earlier explains that to me. Is there any way to be more specific about the kinds of things that would it be useful to keep you all from getting into trouble to be more specific about the kinds of things that are exempt from public records disclosure?
Yeah, I mean, the language on that is, I mean, you could put some, and we debated this a couple of different ways. I think I'm the one that just said, well, put something general in there. And then Scott, with my approval, did this. Perhaps the committee may designate items, I don't know what you call items or materials, as confidential and to the extent allowed by law exempt from public records laws or something.
Would you mind drafting something better to put in there, and we can my only other question was on Section E about removal. Yeah, Section E about removal. So, the number 3, any member of the audit committee may be removed with or without cause by a majority vote of the audit committee. So I assume that refers to both internal and external members.
Hmm.
And that's kind of interesting, but given who appoints the internal members. But the thing that concerned me about that was, so, Rob, I imagine you and Addie and maybe Jennifer too are the same way. I tend to think about the worst case scenario and try to protect against it. So the worst case scenario that I came up with here was that for some awful reason, a bunch of people on the audit committee were in some kind of collaboration to do something nefarious. And there was one audit committee member or 2 audit committee members who were pushing back against that. And the majority of nefarious audit committee members could remove the ones who were pushing back without any check by anybody else. And that concerned me. And so certainly under 2, if somebody's not attending, removal by the committee chair makes sense because that person can point to a record of the removed member not having attended meetings. But on 5, you could just gang up against somebody. It could be a personality conflict, and so I wondered if that would be better if that had to be approved by the commission.
Well, where's the appointment of committee members? There it is. D.
The appointment of committee members, so the where are we for? Committee members are appointed,
Yeah, so the appointments members are subject to ratification by the commission.
yeah.
So you
And
could put something like removal by the audit committee is subject to ratification by commission.
that would make me so much more comfortable.
I think that's fine.
Scott, what do you think?
I agree.
Yeah, okay, so adding subject to ratification by the commission, okay.
Yeah. Because we're using the same language and it gives it the same power to, veto. So I think that's good.
Okay,
I think if I may, I think the concerns were just the time that it takes to replace a chair, a position.
which I totally get, but again, my husband accuses me sometimes of being paranoid, and I tell him that I've spent many years of my life and lots of money getting to be this way, so I like to protect against this kind of stuff.
Well, the
That's-
one question with that, now thinking worst case scenario, of course, is that if the audit committee votes to remove, does that mean the person is removed until the commission reinstates, or are they removed? Are they on the audit committee until the commission ratifies?
Which is the better approach that allows the audit committee to function well?
Yeah, well, depends on the scenario, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't think it matters. Do you want to go back to the other people on the committee and get an opinion about that before we do anything?
How about this? They may be removed, subject to ratification. However, the chair may reinstate the audit committee pending. I don't know. Yeah, maybe we wordsmith this a little bit. I could see a couple of options here. Yeah.
Okay, so I will go ahead and make the other sort of just basic changes that we've talked about. If you wordsmith that and the last section on confidentiality,
Okay.
we just have to bring this back one more time, but I'm hoping we can do it soon.
Okay.
All right. Anybody else have anything on the audit committee charter? Jennifer or Addie?
No, I guess my only question would be, and it may just be a non-issue, is just to kind of run this through the lens of now that we're going to be in the executive branch, like what might be missing in terms of like autonomy to do things. And are we going to have to build in some approvals from, the governor on some of these decisions? Again, I don't know if it would apply, but I just don't know what that kind of new structure is going to look like.
I think that's a great comment, and I'm working with Jesse to consult with somebody from the Justice Department on the bylaws. And I can also consult with that person on this and then get back. And I'm hoping that that meeting will be set up in the next week or so. And I will add that to the list, Jennifer. Thank you. That's a really smart suggestion. Anything else? All right.
I just did want to say thanks, Susan, for doing this work. And while I was hoping to push this forward, I think that one more round of ping pong is worth it. And I would say I'm used to this because Susan was my legal writing instructor my first year at law school. And so I'm used to getting this really good feedback from her. So thanks.
I wasn't your legal writing instructor.
Maybe you were my crim law instructor.
That sounds more like it.
Yeah.
You'll excuse me if I don't remember you.
Yeah, that's fine. There's like 800 of us. So
okay, so the next thing on the agenda is we have occasionally, some of us, maybe all of us on the commission, have received emails or phone calls or letters from members of the public complaining about a variety of things. And we need to have more guidance to commission members about how to deal with it. Right now, the only guidance that we have is in the bylaws, which we're going to be amending, but I want to take this up as a separate issue. And so right now, what the bylaws say is that if a commission member is approached by an aggrieved person, the member should direct the person to the correct course of action to be pursued and shall not discuss the complaint with the aggrieved person. And then all communications with the aggrieved person shall be in writing. A member who's approached by word of mouth shall so inform the aggrieved person and shall send a memorandum to the chair identifying the aggrieved persons and indicating the time of the conversation and the instructions conveyed by the member to the aggrieved person. I am pretty sure that people have not been following these guidelines. And I don't think these guidelines are specific enough. And I'm interested in hearing what you all think.
I have, go ahead, Rob, did you have something to?
I'm not sure what an aggrieved person, do we have a definition of aggrieved?
Yeah.
No definition of aggrieved person, right? We don't.
Right. Because I always thought this is more of like an aggrieved person with someone who's wants to make a formal complaint about like misconduct or something, not just somebody lobbying you,
Yeah.
Definitely a definition would be helpful. And I want us to be really thoughtful in that definition because I think as members who serve the public, we want to be accessible to a certain extent. And I would assume able to have some of these conversations without sending a formal memo in response in order to gather information from various constituencies and individuals. And I like, Rob, what you're saying about sort of being really clear to differentiate between a formal complaint versus someone lobbying us or wanting to have conversations about the function of the agency that aren't rising to the level of sort of a seriousness that you're describing.
I agree, but there's also the problem on the other side of one of us saying something that then gets quoted in Willamette Week or.
Well, I think that's a media question, right? Like that's there should be a media policy, and I think that should be different. I also think we should have a policy with regard to talking to like legislators and other policymakers. I don't think we should be sort of out and about chit-chatting with our legislator without sort of checking in with Lisa and her team. So I think there's room to consider the different scenarios, but if a public, defender in Deschutes wants to reach out to me to talk about what they're seeing in their caseload, I'm really reticent to have to say no or send a memo or any
So
of those.
there's those kinds of things, I agree, but I think that it's not only a question of talking to reporters, it's a question of me talking to member of the public about public defense in general, right? Somebody contacts me upset about the public defense crisis, and I say something, and that person talks to a reporter and says, Susan said blah, blah, blah. So I mean, I think.
But to be fair, that reporter would have to check in with you before quoting you. They'd have to check the source, and there'd have to be multiple people. I mean, I don't disagree with you that we should be very cautious, and we're at the edge of my communications knowledge. So maybe part of what we need to do is bring in the new comms person to think about some of this. But I think there is a level of care that we want to provide, but I'm really nervous about being inaccessible to the folks we serve. That's sort of the point of having a board, is my understanding, which is a really unique structure for a state agency that is perhaps a different conversation for a different day. But to the extent that there is a board, I think, I don't know, that's just something I'm concerned with. And I think our public generally, our provider communities have felt a lack of transparency, have felt walled out, feel like decisions
Absolutely.
are made without them all the time. We're hearing that constantly. So I think there's an extra emphasis on how we make this decision that isn't promoting this idea that sort of we don't want input. We're making decisions behind closed doors. If you reach out to us, you're just getting a memo that says we can't talk to you, et cetera.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more. So we have to differentiate all of these things. Jennifer, do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, the process, I'm just thinking, like, aside from kind of the public engagement, but if as a commissioner that is not a lawyer, this feels very like process heavy and intimidating potentially to someone that may not be used to writing memos. And so I guess I'm also just wondering about the process. Like, if you're trying to find a balance in the commission of folks who, have experience being a public defender or a lawyer, but also folks with lived experience who have been touched by the system, this is going to freak them out, I think. And I think folks are, yeah, I'm just wondering how we can just make the process a little bit more accessible.
So I'd like to I agree with what everybody's saying. I think there are all of these concerns that we need to somehow capture in some guidelines. And I don't think they need to be in the bylaws. I think they can just be, I don't think it has to be that formal, right?
Yeah, I think it
But
could
I
be
think there need to
trainings.
be guidelines or trainings.
Yeah.
And I would love it. I'm taking notes, by the way. I would love it if one of you, Jennifer or Addie or Rob, could take on the task of trying to draft something that captures all of this. Maybe if two of you could do it, and then we could compare what you come up with. Because we're coming at this from really different angles and experience and needs. If a couple of you could take on just writing some guidelines and let's compare what we come up with.
Can I make an alternative suggestion that you're welcome to shoot down? We do have a new comms person at
I was
OPD.
just gonna ask. Yeah.
And so I would suggest perhaps we consider having that person do a first draft. This is sort of their area of expertise. And they will understand particularly the media risks, the legislative risks, so they're part of that team in that department and may be able to take the rowing oar first, and then we can take a look at what they come up with.
Well, I think that's fine, unless we want to have this done sooner rather than later. And the comms person, based on my conversations with Jesse, the comms person has a pretty full plate of dealing with legislative stuff and providers and judges and so forth. And I think it would be absolutely essential to run things by a comms person and get that person's input. I think it might be more efficient and get that input sooner if we gave the comms person something to react to.
I think that's fair, but I guess my question also is like, aren't there current processes? Or also like, what would be the process of that the governor's office has as well when it comes to dealing with the press?
This
Happy
goes beyond
Addie.
dealing with the press, of course, but yes, you're right. We can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to work with you, Addie, on some draft language, but I also want a starting point that is informed by a professional.
I'm happy to try and be helpful. I would say it sounds like the comms person and I are in similar positions in terms of current availability of time. So Jennifer, you and I can talk for sure, but I'm also a little over tapped at this exact moment.
Well, I think we're all pretty busy. And I think none of us want anything more on our plates. But on the other hand, this is a job that needs to be done. So if you guys have a chance to put your heads together and come up with something, I will talk to Jesse about what kind of time we can wrench from the comms person and what kind of timeline we're talking about in terms of getting that time.
And for clarification, do we have something currently in terms like where can I find the language in terms of like you have to submit a memo and all of okay,
It's in the
cool.
bylaws.
I'm just looking for it specifically. Okay.
It's in the current bylaws
Okay.
under grievance procedure.
Gotcha. Okay. I can take a run at it.
All right, I will find out what, if anything, we can expect to get from the comms person, and we'll come at this from both directions. Anything else, Rob? Do you have anything to add to this?
Rob, did you want to volunteer to write it? Is that what I'm
You're
hearing?
you're muted.
No, Addie, that is exactly not what I said, but
I couldn't help myself, sorry.
because honestly, there's probably other commissions that might have a head start on this, like Oregon Liquor Cannabis Commission, or I'm not sure what other commissions there are that are similar to ours. But there's probably a few.
Would
I
somebody
would
like
want
to?
I would
take the
just want
task
to
of
do, I mean,
looking for
someone's
that?
got to do some homework, and it seems to me the comms person or the governor's office, like Jennifer said, is an appropriate place to start. For me, just to
Okay.
start putting pen to paper and coming up with something would probably be relatively worthless.
I'm only laughing because I feel the same way, not because I think your words would be worthless. But I think
You
Okay,
agree
so
I'm relatively worthless.
So here's a suggestion. Instead of putting pen to paper, who would like to either contact other commissions or go onto their websites and find out their communications policies?
I can do that.
Great, thank you, Jennifer. That would be extraordinarily helpful. And if you wanted to send what you have found or links or anything like that to Mara, she can distribute them to the rest of us.
Sounds good.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, and I will still find out about using the comms person. So we have 20 minutes left, and the next thing on the agenda is the bylaws. These bylaws were put together starting last January when I was brand new on this commission. I had no idea how any of this worked. And I think that it's been an education for me, for sure, and maybe for other people to have been on this now for almost 10 months. And there are certainly things in these bylaws that need to be tweaked and changed. So I've asked Jennifer Nash and Jesse to give me a list of parts of the bylaws that they think need changing or eliminating or supplementing. I have a pretty long list that I went through of things that I think need to be changed. Some of them are just nits, but some of them are not. I don't think we have time in the next 15 minutes to go through all of them. Although I'm happy to start in on that if people want. I wondered if any of you have had a chance to go through the bylaws and see what you think needs to be added or eliminated or tweaked. And again, I realize everybody is really, really busy. And so my question is whether you want to leave that to me and Jesse and Jennifer, or whether you want to take some time to look through the bylaws and see what you think might need attending to.
First, I'm fine with you guys identifying issues that this committee can then work on. And maybe that's the most efficient way to do it. Sounds like you guys have already put some time into that. And I'm not prepared really to go through that page by page here. Second, is there something in here where we say that the governance subcommittee reviews the bylaws on some sort of a basis? And do we have a schedule for that? So we don't just do ad hoc when reviews? I thought we put that in there.
I think it's in there that we review it from time to time, but I'd have to look that up again.
Because I know we had a discussion about, oh, we don't want to be redoing these every 6 months. So I thought we had a schedule on there, like, but I could be wrong because I haven't reviewed these bylaws. Recently.
Definitely talked about it, and I read
Yeah.
through it, and I don't think I saw it, but I could have missed it. So I'll go back.
I could have
Little
missed
finer.
it. I could have
That
missed
could be
it
a
too, but
really
hold
nice.
on. I've got them here. Let me see if I can find it.
I imagine there's a best practice out there.
Well, it's
I
under,
think for one thing, we need to at least go through them to see if anything has to be altered as we move into the executive branch.
yeah, and under Article 7, the last article to the bylaws, it just says they'll be amended by 2/3 vote of voting members at any meeting, provided the topic is posted on the action item. So it doesn't have anything here about the bylaws, but how about in our bylaws?
Those are our,
Well, are these,
those are the commission bylaws.
yeah, so our bylaws might say something. So
What do you mean our bylaws?
didn't the governance committee subcommittee have a charter or bylaws or something?
Boy, I don't think so.
Okay, maybe there's something in here about the governance committee where it
There's
sets up
something about the
subcommittee.
governance committee, but we don't have our own bylaws.
All right. Generally, meetings,
It's subcommittee, it says that that we
subcommittees.
can have a subcommittee, a governance subcommittee. It says that we'll meet. It goes into our agendas, our materials, our conduct of our subcommittee meetings. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, I get, it does make sense to review these and make any amendments we need to make probably before going into the governor's office. I get that. And I'm fine with it. I just thought maybe there was a schedule that we had here.
Well, one of the things we can do is amend the bylaws to have a schedule.
That's what I was trying to say, and I imagine there are best practices around that. So I'm
Yeah.
not sure how much our former staff person who was working with us sort of devised these based on board governance best practices and or not, but that's something we could look into because there are lots of sort of guidelines out there about frequency of review, et cetera, when it comes to things like this. So rather than pulling it out of a hat. Although
Well, we pulled it out of a hat. We started with the bylaws from the previous commission. And there was some input about best practices. As I said, I am going to meet with someone from the Justice Department who now works with us. And I'm sure that person, I don't yet know exactly who it'll be, will have a lot to say. Anything else anyone wants? I'm happy to keep working on this.
can I ask just a process question? If
Yeah,
that's okay? So it sounds like you're reviewing it with our DOJ counsel. The governor's office is reviewing it and their counsel, I assume, are reviewing it from their perspective before we move over to make
I
sure.
have had no contact with the governor's office, and are you suggesting that we need to have someone from the governor's office look at this also?
I'm not sure the best process, and I'm not, DOJ has different retention agreements and agreements with the governors. I don't know who's going to be considered their client or the vantage they're going to review it from without getting too esoteric. I just want to make sure that we don't do a whole really thoughtful review process, then get in the governor's office and have advice and counsel from the governor's office that says, now that you're in the executive branch, you've missed a few things.
Good advice, and I will look into that. Jennifer, do you have any input on this?
That was the same that I was going to mention, but I will reread this with finer detail just to make
Same.
sure I'm missing something. But I'm also like, I don't know what I don't know. So like, I don't know sometimes necessarily what I'm missing. Because I
Right.
read this and it was like, this seems pretty straightforward. But then to hear like, oh, there's additional feedback, I'm like, oh, okay, what would that be?
Well, I will, needless to say, working on this is pretty time consuming. And that's part of the reason I'm asking you all to share some of the other tasks
Absolutely.
on the committee, right? I will keep working on this, and I will find a way consistent with public meeting laws to get information back to you in between our meetings. But that brings me to the last thing on the agenda. It would be extremely useful if we could have fixed meeting dates for this subcommittee, because it would eliminate the hours of time that Mara has to spend trying to coordinate with all of us to find dates that work, and which then puts off the amount of time in between our meetings. So I'd like to know two things. The first is, how often do you think this subcommittee should meet? Anybody?
I mean, it
I
feels
think,
like, oh, good.
I think quarterly is enough, honestly. And if you need special meetings, you can put them between them.
I was gonna say, because I think there's like this initial time where when we're figuring out processes is gonna require probably more frequent meeting. But once we're past that and have our documents finalized, I don't think we need to meet as often. So I think quarterly would make sense.
Susan, I'm wondering what you're thinking, because it sounds like you're pulling the rowing oar on a lot of this and that it's a lot of time. So what would be helpful from us or others in your perspective?
Well, I think it would be helpful to have meetings more than quarterly. I think if we had quarterly meetings, they would be very long meetings. I was thinking monthly, but I'm willing to say every other month.
What do you see coming up as future tasks for us to do? Like, what if we did monthly meetings for the first 3 months and then had planned to switch to quarterly, but not necessarily scheduled monthlies?
That might work. I have a list of tasks, some of which are on the back burner. The bylaws was actually put on the front burner by Jennifer and Jesse. So that's why it's here now. Audit committee, obviously on the front burner. I will put together the list of other tasks that I'm aware of and get Mara to send that out to you, just so you know what's coming up.
I have another thought or question that corresponds with this. I feel like I'm the stick in the mud today, so I apologize, Susan. I don't want to be. I am a solution-oriented individual. I do notice, though, that this subcommittee, 3 of the 4 members have other duties within the commission, including chairing 2 other of the subcommittees. So there's a lot of time spent by those of us on this committee. And I feel like what's unfortunately happening is you're feeling the brunt of that as the chair of this subcommittee. I can at least speak for myself. I can't speak for Rob, but as the legislative chair, I know that always gets my first attention and this gets my second attention, which is not fair to this subcommittee or to you. And so I wonder if one of the other things we want to talk about is the composition of this subcommittee and whether it might not be helpful to tap some individuals who aren't otherwise committed so you can have more dedicated, attentive members.
Addie,
Not that this isn't
I have,
important. I love
I have asked Jennifer
Uh-oh.
to find us other committee members for the last 3 months.
Well, so at
And
least I'm not missing the mark here.
you are not
You're
missing
not
the
alone.
mark.
You should feel validated. We can
I
find
feel
solace
totally
in-
validated, but unfortunately, Jennifer's list is this long, and there are other things like talking to legislators, meeting with LFO, meeting with the governor's office, that have practicing law that have taken priority. But I will once again
Well, I
ask.
wonder if we might just have, I've used this on boards I've chaired before, which isn't to say it's super easy, but at the next meeting, we have an Excel sheet that has each of the members and each of their commitments, and there's a little gentle public shaming that happens where we pull that up, and those who have 0 boxes marked with an X may be gently coerced into stepping up and stepping into something. And so it doesn't have to be something that happens on the sidelines, but can be done during an already scheduled time. Maybe
Yeah.
a terrible idea, maybe too much, or maybe not Chair Nash's style, but I want you to not feel like you're carrying the weight of this. And it sounds like leaning heavier on staff isn't a good solution either, which can often be a solution in volunteer boards. So
Yeah, no,
I don't
they're
want
pretty,
like
the staff
so-
is pretty overextended. I hear that pretty constantly. All right, I'll suggest that to Jennifer.
I'm also, if it's helpful, I'm happy to send that email. I don't know how it will land coming from me, but I can at least take that off of your plate.
No, I can deal with that. That's not a problem.
Okay.
And I don't blame Jennifer. I mean,
Of course.
she's. All right,
This is this is sort of out of left field. I get it. But I've been thinking about this commission as well. And they should pay a wage for being on this commission if they expect this commission to overhaul this agency. They're asking us to do a lot of work and devote a lot of our professional expertise and time. And I'm concerned that we're going to lose good people who simply can't pay their bills because they're spending so much time, or they're like, I get the public shaming, but there's people that have a whole lot of stuff going on personally, that are trying to make a living. And I get it though, Addie, but it's sort of like, I don't know. And I'll be happy to waive my commission fee, by the way. But
there is a per diem.
yeah, but I don't even put it in for that. I mean, I hopefully other people do, but it's a complicated, bullshitty sort of process that makes me not want to do it.
Well, and I also heard that it hasn't been, that HR hasn't figured out the right way to pay it yet.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
And I did put it in, I probably did it wrong, but I didn't get a check, and that's fine. But I just think that and I've heard people say, we expect the commission to fix this. And I've said to them, this is a volunteer commission that doesn't get paid. And that's a really unrealistic expectation that we are going to fix. It's the agency that needs to fix the problem, not us. And in my opinion, they need to do 90% of it. But I'm just saying that I think they should probably pay these commissioners if they think that they should be doing this much work.
well, part of the problem is that we're called the same thing as the agency. Back when there were two different names, it was easier for the public and for all of us to distinguish the employees from the volunteers. But as you've said, this is another issue beyond the scope of this committee. So
I don't know. Governance subcommittee could say that we think that this would function much better if these were paid positions. That was part of our suggestion. We could make that recommendation.
well, we can make that suggestion. Should we add it to the legislative agenda?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll take it and run it over to my committee.
I mean,
Okay, Addie, this is for your committee now.
We'll take this one too easy. I'm just teasing. But I do appreciate, Rob, I really appreciate what you're saying. It certainly crossed my mind as someone who's a non-retired member. Not that there should be a difference in terms of times and expertise, but the amount of hours that I am putting in. And your point about sort of like using our professional expertise is really well taken also, because I think a lot of us are here because of what we bring to the table. And I certainly didn't mean to sort of insinuate that folks were choosing against this or that
I know.
I know you know that, but just to say that, because I also feel like sometimes stuck between that decision of one more meeting and getting something done I need to do or meeting a personal need, et cetera. So I really appreciate that.
So let me just say that as a retired person, I don't mind taking on more than people who have full-time jobs. But I also have other things in my life, and I cannot let this swallow my life.
Absolutely.
And,
yeah.
And the other part of it is that I think, as this committee meeting has shown, we just do better when we have the input from a wider variety of people. If it's only me working on the bylaws, they're not going to be done well, because
if people are paid, they show up. And they're volunteers.
So we need the input of people with widely different experiences, because I know what I know, but I don't know what you all know. So, and I think that your suggestions in this committee meeting have shown how true that is. They're just things that aren't on my radar screen. So it's not just a question of who has the time, it's a question of needing everybody's expertise.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. So put that on your legislative committee there, Addie. Get
Sure,
that done for us.
Thank you all for doing this. In terms of dates, I'll get out a task list. If you all could let Mara know days of the week and times of the day that it's easy for you to schedule an hour meeting on a regular basis, that would be extremely helpful. I think, as we've shown, we've gotten a lot done in an hour here. So an hour and a half should be all that we need. If you could just let Mara know times that we might be able to aim for, that would be great.
Yeah, I would just chime in and say that with the legislative session picking up, they don't meet on Fridays. And so I would just say, really, for me, that's the only day I'm going to have available, because I'm going to be working session. So
Friday works for me.
I hold Friday afternoons as catch-up time from most of my work. So absent travel schedules that I can't predict, it tends to be the best time for me as well.
Yeah.
Friday's
Good
my
to
day.
know. All right. Thank you all for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
See you soon.